During yesterday's lesson, we went over poetry, and we reviewed some rhythmic devices and some figurative language. We went over alliteration, rhyme, onomatopoeia, repetition, assonance, and then beyond that, we went over some figurative language, simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, allusion, symbolism, and idioms. Now the reason that we went over it is because we're starting a small poetry unit based off of the Harlem Renaissance. And today I want to go ahead and show you the first poem that we will be using. The poem is titled Dreams Deferred by Langston Hughes. And what I'm going to show you is how to go ahead and do a close read and annotation of the poem. Before we go ahead and start annotating and reading the poem, let's go ahead and remind ourselves of a couple of facts about the Harlem Renaissance. Yesterday we watched a video on YouTube, the Crash Course by John Green on the Harlem Renaissance and Langston Hughes. To remind ourselves, remember, the Harlem Renaissance was a name given to the cultural, social, and artistic explosion that took place in Harlem between the end of World War I and the middle of the 1930s. During this time period, Harlem was a cultural center, drawing Black writers, artists, musicians, photographers, poets, and scholars. One of the main poets of this time period was Langston Hughes. He was very famous for his writing, for his poetry, for the things he had to say. Dreams Deferred by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? First thing, in doing a close read, I'm going to go ahead and number each line. Now, after doing that, I'm going to go ahead and focus on the title, Dreams Deferred. Now, we all know how it feels to go ahead and have a dream, trying to accomplish a goal, like doing well on a test, joining a sports team or a club, or even bigger dreams. Think about the colleges that you want to go to or the careers that you want to have in the future. Now, the next word is deferred, and this word is very important. When we're looking at the definition, it means a postponement or a delay. Now imagine all these dreams that you have being postponed. Say you couldn't do well on that test. Say you can never get in the college that you want to go into. Say that you never try and attempt to get that career that you dream of having. This is what we're talking about when we're looking at dreams deferred. Go ahead and look at our literary devices. Now right off the bat, I can go ahead and see some similes. First simile that I see, like a raisin in the sun. Does it stink like rotten meat? Is it like syrupy sweet? Is it a heavy load? So we have 4 similes, and we can see that a lot of them are using punctuation marks, and that being question marks. Now right here we end with a metaphor. That I'm noticing, I'm seeing alliteration, and I see that with the D sound here, and I also see it with syrupy sweet. Another thing that I notice, there is some kind of rhyme, and I see that with sun and run. I see that with meat and sweet, and I see it again with load and explode. Moving on from there, I also now want to go ahead and focus on these different pictures. First question, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? That's a negative image. Fester like a sore and then run? Again, negative image. Does it stink like rotten meat or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet. Again, negative. Sag like a heavy load. Now, something to go ahead and keep in mind, all of these images are passive images. Nothing is going on here. No one is really doing an action. None of these objects are doing an action. But there is one difference. We end right here with explode. That's not passive. Now we have an active voice here. And beyond that, it's violent. Now Hughes is doing this on purpose, giving you all these negative images and then ending with a violent explosion. Beyond that, I also want you guys to go ahead and focus on our verbs, our nouns, our adjectives being used, because he's doing a very good job using negative verbs. And what I mean by that is, let's go ahead and highlight our different verbs. First one that I see is deferred. Then dry. We have fester. We have stink. We have sugar over. We have sags, and then we have explode. All of these being negative verbs. Now look at our adjectives. Rotten meat, syrupy sweet, heavy. Again, painting this picture that maybe something started off positive, but then because of time, because of postponement, it has become something else. What once was good is now bad. Looking at our first image, first you start off with a grape that turns into a raisin and shrivels. Then you have a sore that might start off small, but it becomes huge and big, and infection starts over. Then you have this idea of a good piece of meat all of a sudden going bad and becoming rotten. Rotten to the point that there's crust all over it and there's stink. So all these images are showing you something positive that ended up becoming negative. Now to continue on, I want to go ahead and focus on this image of a raisin and of rotten meat. When we're looking at that, we're seeing dark colors. I'm seeing brown and I'm seeing red. When I think of brown and red, think of Langston Hughes. He is the voice for our African American people during this time period. So this right here is symbolic of the struggles of the African American people. And when we're thinking of red, we're thinking of the violence that has to have had happened to actually for them to get their voice. So when we're really looking at it, this is a political commentary of the time period. Langston Hughes is trying to go ahead and say that an oppressed people can turn from passive to violent if they don't reach their dreams. Now that we've reviewed dreams deferred, your homework is to go ahead and go over dreams. Now this is another poem by Langston Hughes, and this one has more of a positive view on dreams and what dreams can do if you hold on to them. Take the time to annotate it, look at the literary devices, the figurative language that is used. Also, write down any comments, any visuals, any imagery that you see, and we will review this tomorrow. During yesterday's lesson, we went over poetry, and we reviewed some rhythmic devices and some figurative language. We went over alliteration, rhyme, onomatopoeia, repetition, assonance, and then beyond that, we went over some figurative language, simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, allusion, symbolism, and idioms. Now the reason that we went over it is because we're starting a small poetry unit based off of the Harlem Renaissance. And today I want to go ahead and show you the first poem that we will be using. The poem is titled Dreams Deferred by Langston Hughes. And what I'm going to show you is how to go ahead and do a close read and annotation of the poem.